The Whispering Woods had always been a place of mystery and fear, woven into the town's history like an ominous thread. As children, Alex and their friends had dared each other to approach the forest's edge, spurred on by tales passed down through generations. It was said that the forest was as old as time itself, its trees twisted and gnarled with age, standing as silent witnesses to centuries of secrets. Local lore spoke of people who had ventured inside, never to be seen again. Most unsettling were the whispers. Those who wandered too close claimed they heard faint, disembodied voices, calling softly from the depths, luring them in with the promise of secrets only the woods could reveal. Growing up, Alex had always been fascinated by the unexplained. As an adult, their curiosity only deepened. The townsfolk, however, warned them to stay away. The forest is alive, they'd say, eyes clouded with fear. It doesn't just have trees, it has souls, lost souls. But Alex was drawn to it, like a moth to a flame, entranced by the idea of uncovering the truth behind the legends. Every night, they would lie awake, imagining the forest's shadows stretching out to claim the unwary. And so, despite the warnings, they decided to explore the forest for themselves. They spent weeks preparing for the journey. Maps, a compass, supplies for at least a day, everything they might need for a quick in-and-out exploration. What they couldn't prepare for, however, was the unknown. Finally, the day came. The sky was overcast, casting a dim light over the forest's edge. As Alex approached the boundary where the tall, ancient trees stood like sentinels, they felt a chill run down their spine. It was as if the air itself had grown heavier, pressing down on them, warning them of the danger ahead. But curiosity won over caution. The first step into the forest felt like crossing a threshold into another world. The sounds of the town, distant cars, chatter, the hum of daily life, faded away, replaced by an eerie silence. The ground beneath their boots was soft, blanketed with moss and fallen leaves, muffling their footsteps. The air was cool, damp, and filled with the scent of earth and decay. The forest's canopy blocked out most of the sunlight, leaving only scattered beams to pierce through the darkness. For a moment, Alex hesitated, the legends resurfacing in their mind. But then, they shook off the doubt and ventured further in, driven by a hunger for the unknown. The deeper Alex went, the more the forest seemed to close in around them. The path, which had been relatively clear at the entrance, quickly became overgrown, choked by thorny bushes and creeping vines. The trees loomed overhead, their branches intertwining like a vast, skeletal ceiling. Alex glanced back, half expecting to see the forest entrance behind them, but it was gone, swallowed up by the underbrush and shadows. They were truly inside now, surrounded on all sides by the ancient, whispering trees. The silence was palpable, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves as the wind stirred through the canopy. It felt unnatural, this quiet, as though the forest were holding its breath. Alex slowed their pace, senses on high alert, eyes scanning the shadows for any movement. The trees seemed to shift in the periphery of their vision, though when they turned to look directly, everything remained still. It was unsettling, like walking through a dream where the world constantly changed behind your back. Then came the whispers. At first, they were faint, indistinguishable from the rustling leaves. But as Alex moved deeper, they grew clearer, forming into soft, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to drift from every direction. They paused, straining to hear, their heart pounding in their chest. The whispers were close, yet distant, an ethereal chorus of voices that blended together, creating a sound both soothing and ominous. It was like a song, an ancient melody carried on the breeze, just beyond the edge of understanding. "Is someone there?" Alex called out, their voice sounding small in the vastness of the forest. The whispers stopped abruptly, replaced by a heavy silence that pressed in around them. For a heartbeat, all was still. Then, a faint giggle echoed from somewhere to their left, light and childlike, sending a chill down their spine. Alex turned quickly, eyes scanning the dense foliage, but saw nothing. The giggle faded into a faint sigh, and the whispers resumed, now sounding closer, more insistent. A surge of unease washed over them. This wasn't just a forest. It was something more, something alive. Alex gripped their backpack straps tighter, their knuckles white. They were in too deep to turn back now. The forest had already begun to play its game, drawing them in with its haunting song. And despite the fear gnawing at the edges of their mind, a part of them wanted to go further, to see what lay hidden within the forest's heart. The whispers followed Alex as they ventured deeper, a constant, unnerving presence in the background. They couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, observed by countless unseen eyes hiding behind the thick curtain of foliage. Every crack of a branch, every rustle of leaves made them jump, their nerves stretched taut. The forest floor was a chaotic tangle of roots and decaying leaves, forcing them to watch their step and slowing their progress. Then, it happened. Out of the corner of their eye, Alex caught a glimpse of movement, a shadow passing between the trees. They froze, heart hammering against their ribs, straining to catch another look. There, amidst the shadows, a figure stood. It was barely visible, shrouded in the darkness of the undergrowth, but it was unmistakably human in shape. Alex's breath hitched. Who could possibly be out here, in the middle of this forsaken forest? "Hello?" they called, their voice wavering despite their attempt at confidence. The figure didn't move, didn't respond. It simply stood there, an outline against the shadows. Alex took a tentative step forward, their pulse quickening. The figure remained still, its silence more unsettling than any noise could be. Then, as Alex moved closer, the figure seemed to blur, its edges dissolving into the mist that crept along the forest floor. Fear surged through them. They blinked, trying to focus, but the figure was gone. In its place, the forest stood silent and indifferent, the trees swaying gently in the breeze. Alex stumbled back, heart racing, a cold sweat breaking out across their skin. What had they just seen? Was it a person? A trick of the light? Or something else? The whispers intensified, swirling around them like a storm. Words began to form, disjointed and overlapping. "Turn back," one voice hissed. "Lost," another moaned. Alex clamped their hands over their ears, trying to block out the sound, but it seeped into their mind, chilling their thoughts with its icy touch. They spun around, searching for the path they had come from, but every direction looked the same, an endless sea of trees and shadows. The forest had changed, warping around them, trapping them in its depths. Panic clawed at their throat as they realized the truth. They were lost. The forest had taken them in, and now it was toying with them, testing their resolve. The whispers quieted, leaving a void of silence that was somehow even more unnerving. Alex stood there, heart pounding, fear creeping into every corner of their mind. The game had begun, and the forest wasn't going to let them go easily. As Alex pushed forward, the forest seemed to shift and change around them. It was as if the trees themselves moved, their branches twisting and bending to form new, maze-like paths. The ground was no longer familiar. Roots jutted out like jagged rocks, creating obstacles that made it nearly impossible to walk in a straight line. They had lost all sense of direction, every tree and path looking eerily similar, as though the forest was intentionally disorienting them. The fog crept in thicker now, clinging to the ground and obscuring their view of even a few feet ahead. Alex stopped to catch their breath, their eyes darting around, searching for anything that could serve as a landmark. There was nothing but an endless sea of trees, their twisted branches interlocking above like a dense web. Panic began to rise in their chest, a cold, creeping dread that clawed at their sanity. They pulled out their compass, hoping it would provide some sense of direction, but the needle spun wildly, refusing to settle on any one point. It was useless. The forest had them now, trapped in its grasp. The whispers returned, louder this time. They filled the air around them, circling like a swarm of locusts. Lost, forever. No escape. The words overlapped, creating a chorus of despair that reverberated in Alex's mind. They clamped their hands over their ears, but it did little to block out the voices. It was as if the whispers were inside their head, echoing off the walls of their thoughts. They closed their eyes, willing the noise to stop, to leave them alone. But the forest was relentless. In a sudden burst of desperation, Alex began to run. They crashed through the underbrush, ignoring the thorns that clawed at their clothes and the roots that threatened to trip them at every turn. They didn't care where they were going. They just needed to move, to escape the suffocating feeling of being watched, hunted. Branches scraped against their skin, and the fog thickened, swirling around their ankles like icy fingers reaching up to drag them down. After what felt like hours, they stumbled into a small clearing, gasping for breath. The fog swirled around the edges, and the trees seemed to lean inward, enclosing the space. Alex sank to their knees, exhaustion and fear mixing into a potent cocktail of despair. They were lost, completely, utterly lost. The forest had twisted itself into a labyrinth, and there was no way out. The whispers had turned into a low hum, almost like the forest was mocking their predicament, enjoying their fear. Through the fog, they noticed something strange. On the opposite side of the clearing, a faint glow caught their eye. It was weak, barely visible, but it was there. They stood up, squinting into the haze. The glow flickered, like the light of a lantern swaying in the breeze. Hope surged within them, a glimmer of salvation in the darkness. Perhaps it was someone else, another traveler, or maybe even help. With renewed energy, they pushed forward toward the light, ignoring the whispers that rose in intensity, warning them to turn back. The light led them deeper into the forest, winding through a path that seemed to open up just for them. It was unsettling, the way the trees shifted aside, as if granting them passage. The glow grew brighter, illuminating the misty path ahead and casting eerie shadows that twisted and danced around Alex's feet. The air grew colder, and they felt a chill creep up their spine. It wasn't just the temperature. It was a deep, gnawing sense of dread that came from the whispers, which were now distinct, clear, and more unnerving than ever. They could hear the voices now, not just as whispers, but as fully formed sentences. Some were pleading, others mocking, and a few were simply gibberish, rambling in a language they couldn't understand. "Come closer," one voice coaxed, soft and melodic. "You don't belong here," another hissed, filled with venom. "Help us," a third voice whimpered, filled with an unbearable sadness that tugged at Alex's heart. The mixture of emotions was overwhelming, a symphony of terror that made it hard to think, to focus on anything other than the cacophony of sounds. With each step, the voices grew louder, filling the air around them like a storm. Alex clutched their head, trying to block out the noise, but it was useless. It was as if the forest itself was speaking, using the voices of those it had claimed over the centuries. They stumbled forward, eyes fixed on the faint light ahead, using it as a beacon to keep themselves grounded. It was their only hope, the only thing that seemed real in this nightmare. Then, out of the fog, figures began to materialize. At first, they were just shadows, indistinct shapes that moved silently among the trees. But as Alex drew closer, the shadows took form. They were people, men, women, children, each one with a look of horror frozen on their faces. Their eyes were hollow, dark pits that seemed to bore into Alex's soul, pleading for something, though they could not say what. Some reached out with skeletal hands, their fingers stretching toward Alex as if begging for help. "Lost, trapped, save us," they moaned, their voices blending with the whispers that swirled around them. Alex's heart pounded, fear surging through them. They wanted to help, wanted to reach out and touch these poor souls, but they were paralyzed, rooted to the spot by the sheer terror of the scene before them. The glow flickered, illuminating the faces of the lost ones, casting them in an eerie, ghostly light. The figures moved closer, forming a circle around Alex. Their movements were slow, almost mechanical, as if they were puppets controlled by unseen strings. The fog thickened, swirling around their feet, and the air grew colder, each breath turning to mist in the icy atmosphere. Alex shivered, not just from the cold, but from the realization that these figures were the souls the forest had claimed. People who had wandered in, just like they had, and never found their way out. The whispers filled the clearing, overlapping into a chaotic jumble of sounds. "Release us." One voice cried out, its tone desperate and broken. Another voice, low and menacing, growled, "You belong to the forest now." The faces around Alex twisted in agony, mouths opening in silent screams. The ground beneath them seemed to pulse, like a heartbeat, vibrating with the energy of the souls trapped within the woods. Alex felt a wave of nausea wash over them. The forest wasn't just alive. It was feeding on these souls, using their fear, their despair, to maintain its hold on the land. And now, it wanted to add Alex to its collection. The realization hit them like a blow to the chest. They had to do something. They couldn't let themselves become another lost soul, another whisper in the forest's endless chorus. With a surge of determination, Alex raised their head and faced the circle of figures. "What do you want from me?" they shouted, their voice trembling but defiant. The forest seemed to recoil, the figures shrinking back slightly. For a moment, the whispers stopped, replaced by a heavy silence. Then, one figure stepped forward, a woman with long, tangled hair and hollow eyes. She reached out, her hand ghostly and translucent. "Free us," she whispered, her voice echoing in the stillness. "Break the forest's hold, and we can leave this place." Alex blinked, confusion and fear mingling in their mind. "How?" they stammered, their voice barely above a whisper. The woman didn't answer, just pointed toward the light, the glow that had led them here. It flared brightly, casting long shadows across the clearing. In the center of the light stood an ancient, gnarled tree, its roots twisting and burrowing deep into the earth. At its base, something shimmered, half buried in the dirt. Alex felt an invisible force pulling them forward, urging them to move. They glanced at the faces surrounding them, seeing hope flicker in their eyes, and knew what they had to do. Taking a deep breath, they stepped toward the tree, their heart pounding with a mixture of fear and resolve. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it. It was their only chance to escape the forest's grasp and to free the souls that had been trapped within its shadows for so long. Alex's steps were slow and deliberate as they moved toward the ancient tree. The light that emanated from its base was different from the rest of the forest's haunting darkness. It was warm, almost inviting, casting a soft amber glow that contrasted sharply with the cold shadows lingering around the clearing. As they got closer, the light grew brighter, pulsating in rhythm with their own heartbeat, filling them with a strange mixture of hope and dread. At the base of the tree, partially buried in the dirt, lay an old lantern. Its glass was fogged and covered in grime, but within, a small, flickering flame burned steadily. Alex reached out and hesitated for a moment, their hand trembling. The whispers around them grew hushed, as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for what was to come. The faces of the lost souls looked on, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Taking a deep breath, Alex grasped the lantern's handle. The moment their fingers closed around the cold metal, a surge of warmth flowed through them. It was as if the flame inside the lantern had transferred some of its light into their own body. The fog around the tree dissipated slightly, revealing the twisted roots that snaked out in all directions, anchoring the tree to the earth. Alex could feel a pulse of energy, a connection between the lantern and the forest itself. "Release us," the woman's voice echoed again, clearer this time. Alex looked up to see the figures around them standing motionless, their eyes fixed on the lantern. They lifted the lantern, holding it high above their head. The flame within grew brighter, casting long shadows that stretched out across the forest floor. The darkness around them recoiled, and the air filled with a low, mournful wail as if the forest was crying out in pain. The light from the lantern intensified, creating a bubble of warmth and safety around Alex. The faces of the lost souls softened, their expressions changing from agony to relief. For the first time since entering the woods, Alex felt a glimmer of hope. They could sense that this light was a key, a force strong enough to confront the forest's malevolence. It was as if the forest had a heart, and they were now holding its essence in their hands. "Guide us," the voices urged. "Take the light to the heart of the forest." With the lantern in hand, Alex began to walk, the light pushing back the shadows that attempted to close in. The forest shifted around them, the trees parting to form a path. It was as if the forest was leading them somewhere, unwillingly clearing the way to its own core. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, mingling with the rustling of leaves and the creaking of branches. The path wound through the forest, twisting and turning as it led deeper into the woods. The air grew colder, and the ground beneath Alex's feet seemed to pulse, like the beat of a giant heart buried deep within the earth. They held the lantern out in front of them, its light casting long, dancing shadows on the trees that surrounded them. The forest groaned, the branches above swaying as if reacting to the light's presence. Finally, the path opened into a large, circular clearing. At the center stood an ancient stone altar, overgrown with moss and vines. The lantern's light illuminated the area, revealing symbols carved into the stone surface, symbols that seemed to writhe and shift as the light touched them. The air here was thick, charged with a dark energy that made Alex's skin crawl. It was the heart of the forest, the source of its power. The whispers rose to a fever pitch, a cacophony of voices screaming in unison, trying to drown out the light. The shadows around the clearing swirled and twisted, forming into shapes that lunged at the edges of the lantern's glow. "Turn back," they howled. "You cannot break the curse." Alex stepped forward, their heart pounding. They could feel the weight of the forest pressing down on them, its anger and fear palpable in the air. This was the moment. They had to confront the darkness, to break the cycle that had trapped so many souls. Raising the lantern high, they approached the altar, the flame inside burning brighter with each step. The ground trembled as they reached the stone. A crack appeared on the surface of the altar, glowing with an eerie blue light. The forest let out a guttural roar, the sound vibrating through the trees and making Alex's bones rattle. It was as if the forest itself was trying to hold them back, to keep its secrets buried deep within its roots. But the lantern's light pushed forward, a beacon of hope in the face of overwhelming darkness. "Break it!" The voices of the souls cried out. Alex brought the lantern down, slamming it onto the altar with all their might. The glass shattered, and the flame within exploded outward in a brilliant burst of light. The clearing was bathed in an intense glow, so bright that Alex had to shield their eyes. The shadows around them screamed, twisting violently before dissolving into. Have you ever heard whispers in the woods that you couldn't explain? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear about your eerie encounters. And if you enjoyed this tale, give us a thumbs up to let us know. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the darkness. Until next time, beware the whispers in the shadows. They might just be calling for you.